Okay, yeah, I want to officially get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Darren from the Codementor team, and I'm very excited to be opening for our Developer Growth Summit 2022. So this is the first time that we're doing something of this scale. So thank you all for taking part in this milestone with us. So our mission as Codementor is to help developers learn and grow, and that's really basically the goal of everything that we do at this company. Including the summit. So our hope is that you'll enjoy learning from the experiences of our awesome speakers and connect with like-minded developers. All right, so formalities aside, I want to give some quick instructions before introducing our speaker and topic for this session. We're using Zoom webinar, and it is completely normal that you can't see other attendees. But as you can see in the chat, there are a lot of you here actually. So feel free to interact with each other. Just make sure to set the chat to send to everybody because it defaults to host and panelists for some reason. Yeah, so you'll also notice something. You also notice the Q&A box on the bottom. This is where you can ask questions during the talk. And yeah, and the speaker either get to it. We'll get to it at the end. Yeah, there will be a dedicated Q&A section. So put your questions there. All right, last but not least, please follow our code of conduct so we can all have a good experience. The link to it is in the chat. Yes, thank you to my colleague. All right, so now I want to officially introduce Jeremy Wight, who is our speaker for this event. Jeremy is currently the VP of Engineering at CareMessage. Before that, he's had over 15 years of experience overseeing different stages of engineering from early to mid-stage tech companies. I'm sure he'll tell us more about that in the talk, but I think my point is he is the right person to talk about expectation setting and career growth engineering. So without further ado, Jeremy, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darren. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Super excited to get to share with you all today and to kick off this awesome summit. I've been connected with Codementor for some years, and I really enjoy mentoring and being able to share and learn from others. It's a huge part of the mentoring experience. So excited to chat with you today. As we get to kick off this summit, you're going to hear from many amazing leaders over the coming hours and next couple of days. And I'm excited as well for some of the other topics. And as you've joined today's session, we're going to be talking specifically about some of the, let's call them soft skills, if you will, of being in the software development profession and how to grow your career, specifically beyond the functional skills. So as Darren said, I have been leading engineering teams for quite some time. I've been in the industry as an engineer and as a product and engineering leader for quite a while. Presently, as he mentioned, I am the VP of Engineering at CareMessage. CareMessage is a Series B stage nonprofit tech company, very much an anomaly in that, but our mission is to improve outcomes of underserved patients throughout the United States and change bend the healthcare curve for those that are needing it most. So it's awesome to get to lead an incredibly mission-oriented organization in awesome technical challenges. And this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. As I said, I've been leading engineering orgs for a long time in different capacities. Had the opportunity to hire, I don't know how many, but definitely in the tens to maybe hundreds at this point over the course of my career. And I'll say that one of the things that I get most excited about as a leader and as a manager is seeing people grow, both in their skills and in their positions. It's something that I really enjoy being a part of and helping people to do. So I'm excited to share on this topic because I think there are some things that hopefully you'll be able to take away. So as we dive in, again, this topic is a guide to growing your career beyond the functional skills. And a lot of that has to do with understanding and setting clear expectations with those that you those that manage you and lead you. And I'm going to try and take a semi-broad approach to how this hopefully advice should be helpful. I will say one caveat: I've never worked at an organization. The largest organization, tech organization I worked at, was about 1,000 people. So if you're coming from like a Microsoft or Salesforce, your miles may vary on this advice, but I hope it to be valuable for really any stage of company that you might be working for. So where we're headed is first, the key is really to understand the context of the organization, the leader that you're working with, making sure that there's some framework in place, even if that's, and I'll kind of share where to go if there isn't one set, because I've been at many organizations that didn't have a framework in place. And so that can be really difficult as somebody who's coming into that scenario, trying to understand how do I advocate for myself and my teammates in this growth process. Talking about that, one of the key, and I would say probably one of the largest keys I've seen to people growing consistently in their careers is owning their one-on-ones, and we'll spend some time in there. And then I'm going to share a tale of two engineers, and this is a story, an illustration, but I have seen this played out very much directly in engineers. So I will withhold names of people to protect anonymity, but it's something I've seen throughout my years of managing people in many different cases. So excited to dive in and hopefully share some insight, and we will for sure have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So as Darren shared, please drop any questions that you have in as they come up. And I won't pause to answer them during this part, but when we get to Q&A, I'm very excited to be able to answer questions and dive in deeper to scenarios that hopefully will be helpful for everyone. So first, when you're trying to understand how to get ahead and how to make sure that you are aligned and set expectations with your manager and leader, you really need to understand the context in which you're working at. What's the organization look like? What's your manager look like? Is there a framework, and how do we set one up? So first, again, organization is going to matter here in terms of what does the reporting structure look like? What is the size of the organization? Is it super flat? Is it super small? A lot of times, early stage startups, if you end up joining a startup kind of company, they may not have spent any time on this, and it's just like, do everything, right? Like that's kind of that's what's expected. As companies tend to mature and get a little larger in their engineering organizations, and I'll say this applies to product organizations as well, but more specifically speaking to engineers here, usually once you get to about 10 engineers, generally there has been some investment made into creating some consistency in the career ladder, but not always. I've seen organizations up to like 25 that didn't really have this well in place, and in any case, this should help in that. But understand, is there something in place first, right? Like, is there a set framework that has been designed for creating consistency in how career progression looks? There's lots of ways that this can be done. Sometimes a Google Doc, a wiki, it'll be a spreadsheet, bullet points or something like that. But try and determine first, is there something there? And this kind of goes to understanding your framework. Is there a framework in place, and is it relevant? I think that's a key thing. And this is also where organization, both size and just where things are at, you need to check. Because in some cases, there might be something that someone created, just like documentation. We've all experienced as engineers, documentation's out of date. Career frameworks and ladders are no different, right? It's very possible that what is there may not have been updated in a long time, or it was something that was kind of like something one person picked up and put in there and isn't being applied consistently. So like, that's where, again, understanding your context and checking in. And this is that third point is like, understanding your manager. Do they know, right? Like, can they help you? I have seen lots of different structures where different types of managers come in, right? Whether that's, in some cases, again, really early stage. If you're an early engineer, you might be reporting directly to CEO, right? Like in some cases, you're going to be reporting to a tech lead, right? Or there's kind of like a lack of certainty of where this person fits in the manager framework, but your projects come from them, your tickets come from them, so it's kind of assumed that they're your manager. You might have, in a more larger org, you might have an engineering manager or a VP of engineering or something like this. So and you might have to do this in both direct and indirect ways of trying to determine, does my manager, like, how long have they been doing this? Do they have the ability to help me here? But try and like get a perspective on this, on the organization and the context. If it's big enough that other people have gone through this before, that people are getting promoted, like, and you're not comfortable, hopefully you are comfortable asking your manager directly. Hopefully you have good leadership, good managers, but it's not always the case that this happens, right? So find ways to try and understand and begin to frame the context of your environment, right? Like, is there a framework? Is it used? Does my manager, whoever I'm reporting to, can they really help me in this process? Or do I really need to take more upon myself, right? How much can I take the things that they say directly versus really trying to frame that with other things? And that is going to depend on the location you're at. And I hope that, again, that you're all working in great organizations with incredible leaders and managers, where it's really clear, the expectations are clear, they're articulated, that your manager is advocating for you, and that they're wanting to help you move in this process. But again, that isn't always the case. So begin to frame and understand your context so that you can then help begin to create a pathway, right? So if you have a framework, like let's say that there is a framework in place in this organization, that you've got a great manager that can help articulate that for you and is helping you to understand where you fit in this, right? And it's being used, and you understand how the career progression process occurs. That is a key part of this as well. Then I think that's where coming and beginning to do a gap analysis on your own skills and things like that, to fit in there, will be really helpful. But before we kind of get into that, there's a lot of times where a framework doesn't exist, and I've seen this many times. And so, like, how to kind of hack a framework, and in other words, like, do it for them, right? Like, say, here's the things that I value, right? Like, here's a way of doing this is, as an engineer, I understand there are multiple things that I need to focus areas that I need to grow in, right? These are the ones that tend to show up on more or less any version of a career ladder that you're going to see, right? There's technical functional skills that you have to have at each level. You may not like to hear this as an engineer, but project management, right, is part of that thing, is a part of your skill set. And at increasing levels, people should not be expecting you in general to be a full-time project manager. That's not where you're getting hired to be an engineer, but a level of organization, being able to estimate, break down, articulate those sorts of things, and sequencing work and things like that at each level is going to increase, right? Some level of expectation there. And then leadership, both self and team, right? Like, so leadership isn't just about necessarily others, it's also about yourself, right? Like, being able to understand the environment that you work in, understand how to make yourself more efficient, understanding how to communicate in the organization that you're operating in. How are you making your team better, right? Yourself and your team better, the process in which you're engaging with to be more efficient, more effective. All of these things are what I would kind of categorize as that leadership part. So technical skills, right? Like, here's, and you can go online and find lots of different career ladders that you could begin to kind of poach from. And what most companies do is they start from somebody else's work, because again, there's a lot of consistency between here. But if there's not one, I would come to the manager and say, here's, it looks like we haven't had one. I'd love to be a part of this, right? There's a tactful way to do this, first of all, right? In talking to your manager about this, it's being honestly curious and inquisitive and coming from a position of wanting to help, but also wanting to say, I really want to grow, right? And I want to make sure that my growth objectives are in alignment as best as possible with what the organization wants and needs, assuming you want to grow within that organization, right? And assuming you're in the right role. And so, coming up with something that you can share is like, hey, I found that I didn't see that we had anything, and it didn't appear that you had something. So here's how I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about how am I growing technically? How am I growing from, in this kind of, scoping, estimating, project management thing as an engineer, and then leadership. Is there anything else that you think is really critical for me in our organization that I should be adding to that list? The other one that you see pretty common, which I think is absolutely important, but it doesn't always manifest in the same way of this framework, would be like alignment with organizational values, right? Like super important. But again, it kind of depends on just how the organization puts together those. But I think these are the typical things that you see in that kind of career ladder. So if there isn't one for them, again, build one. In other words, like articulate the things that you think are really important and ask for feedback on that, right? Because it's already showing that you're taking ownership of your own growth and trying to align that with what the organization and your manager needs. So again, kind of identifying the gaps in your own once you've got a framework, right? You need to then basically say, okay, here's the skills at each level, right? Whether it's something they've articulated or something that you've kind of put together. Here's the things that I think I need to work on in this. And I think being like open and honest about what you're doing well, what you really want to grow in, think you need to grow in, both if it's, again, a well laid out career plan, you should have like some sort of levels, right? Like this is what it looks like at this level, this is what it looks like at that level, and seeing like, okay, hey, like an example of a non-technical thing might be from like the project management, like I need to get better at scoping and estimating tickets or breaking down my work into small workable chunks and communicating those and being able to help you with predictability, right? Like that could be something. Or it could be similarly at the next level, hey, I know I do that well for myself, but I'm not doing a great job at being able to do that for others, which is really difficult because you need to understand what their skill sets are, the things that they're going to likely struggle with. And so like these sorts of things, but identifying here's an area that I want to grow, which means that I would like, help in trying to have the type of work that's going to allow me to do that. And here's the things that I'm going to do. And that's the next part, is sharing your plan, right? Like here's how, what if it's a functional or technical thing, here's the stuff that I'm working on, right? I'm taking a Udemy course on this sort of thing. I'm reading this book on whatever, right? But also I would like, or I'm looking for areas of opportunity in, kind of other special projects or special areas that's going to expand my scope of impact, right? Because that's the thing at each level, your scope of impact should be growing, right? Those values, those, technical skills, project management and leadership, they exist, throughout your career, but at each, positional level, if you will, the expectation is that you're having an expanding impact. Like you have an expanded breadth and depth of technical functional knowledge. You have a better understanding of what's happening within this, organization and what is happening within our, technical sphere. You're also having a bigger impact within your organization on bigger projects, right? Those sorts of things. And you're having a bigger impact on allowing your team to be more effective. So identify those gaps, share a plan for how you're going to execute on these things. And I would say be realistic, right? Be realistic about how long it might take to do something, right? Like and we're all probably familiar with SMART goals, right? And so make them measurable, make them time bound, right? Like actually try and set, like say, okay, over the, like an example of this might be, I want to learn how to work with SQL better, right? So I'm going to take a course on Data Camp and read this book, and then that require me to dive into more of our database, right, and optimization or something like that. So in the next 3 months, I'd like to be able to take on, let's say, take on and effectively tackle 3 medium or large size, projects, however you may define, over the next 3 months or 6 months. And then I'm going to ask you for feedback, right? I'm going to ask you for feedback on how I've done there. Do you think that I've grown, right? And I think that's a critical part, right? Is so identifying those gaps, sharing your plan, and then consistently asking for feedback. The one of the number one things, like one of the top things I've seen for people that grow consistently in their careers is owning their one-on-ones. And I can't overstate this more. People who own their one-on-ones, they show that they are trying to, take ownership of their own growth and making sure that they're moving forward. Here's the things that you can do to do that. Consistently share progress, right? Share some of your progress, and consistently ask for feedback in relation to your career progression, right? Like the goals that you've set, right? The things that you're doing, own the execution of the impact of your primary responsibilities in addition to looking for more, right? I think there's a balance there. Sometimes I've seen individuals try and, reach for, oh, I see the only way to grow here is to grab some new special project or something bigger. And then they don't end up doing a great job on their primary role. And that's really problematic, because ultimately you're going to have like inconsistencies and gaps with your manager. So like be really effective at your primary role in addition to growing in some of those additional things. And then in general, just be prepared. Come to one-on-ones prepared. Have questions consistently. Don't show up with nothing on the agenda, because it's like, one, it puts, your manager should be sharing feedback with you and giving you things for sure. But when you own your one-on-one, you're going to grow regardless of whether your manager is really focused on that for you or not. So I want to talk about like an illustration here. Again, I've seen this played out many times with different individuals, of kind of two types of engineers. Engineer one, they come consistently prepared to their one-on-ones, and they're sharing updates, and they're saying like, here's the things that I progressed on over the past couple of weeks. Here's things that I felt like I learned. They come with questions, meaningful questions on their one-on-one agenda ahead of time, right? Because if you're working on goals and you're working on things that are outside of your comfort zone, naturally, you're not going to do it perfectly well. You're going to find things that you don't have comfort with, right? An example of this, for example, I've also led engineering managers, right? Managing managers. Similarly, when people come into early stage management, it's oftentimes difficult to have difficult conversations, right? To share feedback and things like that. So that's something that someone brings up, right? Is like, hey, I've been having one-on-ones with these 3 individuals. I have some, hard feedback. Can you give me some tips on how to deliver this in a way that's going to be impactful and meaningful, but also are clear and candid, right? And that tells me, right, as their manager, that they're doing the thing, right? They're taking on these responsibilities with all seriousness and trying to go beyond the things that they would otherwise. If they don't, I can't help them. I have to probe and pull these things out, which I'm going to do. But again, it puts the onus on the manager to do that, and it sets a different perception. So engineer one is coming prepared. They're sharing updates. They're sharing what they're doing towards these goals, and they come with relevant questions. They're consistently checking in with their managers on their growth, right? Like they know what the target is, right? Like that's probably the critical thing here. They know what the target is. They're moving towards it, and they're coming prepared and consistently articulating where that's happening. Engineer two, also super common. They generally don't have anything on the one-on-ones, right? They are making an impact, but they can't clearly articulate like what that looks like beyond like the last ticket or last two tickets or things that they've been working on over the past few days. And they make minimal progress on their goals. And as a manager or leader, you find that they like don't recall what those were, or you kind of had the same conversations over and over again over time, right? Because they're not really focused on them. And it's like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot it. They bring it back up, bring it back up. Now, these two engineers could theoretically be doing a similar amount of work, but engineer one is going to grow faster than engineer two. I messed up here. That should have been how to be engineer one. How to be engineer one is review your goals at least bi-weekly, right? Like if you've set goals with your manager, look at them consistently, and then just take some notes on what progress you've made, questions you have, areas of improvement. Or if you can hear the fire truck driving by, remote work, and any areas of improvement that you have, right? Like put these down, schedule time to work on your goals and make that a priority, right? And sometimes that's going to be in work hours, and sometimes you're going to have to take that out of work hours, right? But like that's where growth is going to happen. And then this is a bold one, but especially if there's a defined process, I think it's fair if and when you've consistently done this with your manager, and you've been able to have conversations where you're communicating what you're doing on your goals. They're giving you feedback that yes, you're meeting those things and doing those, is to ask them, hey, like, do you think I'm ready for that next level? Why or why not? Right? Like that's a clear thing to ask them. And I think it's a fair thing to ask them. And if they say like, I think that you are, in many ways operating at that next level, then I think the next question is like, is there anything I can do to help you with this? Right? Like sometimes some companies, the promotion processes it puts a lot of work on the managers trying to help you to get promoted. So, one thing you could do in some cases is like, hey, if there's like a format, like a promotion document, here's like a few bullet points or a few paragraphs on how I've made progress on those goals. And so, and hopefully you guys are doing this, you all are doing this some way through a performance management system or Lattice or, a Google Doc or whatever. But if not, again, if you do this, you're going to make it easier for your manager to advocate for you and make it less work for them. And also you're kind of you're putting that onus on them to do the thing that they should be doing, which is helping you to grow and helping you to move forward in your career. But you're doing it in a way where it's tactful. In the midst of doing all this, the manager is getting something too, right? Like I want all of my people to grow. Why? Because you're going to be taking on bigger, more complex problems. You're going to have a bigger scope of impact. I'm going to be able to trust you and rely on you for more. And that is exactly what every manager everywhere, more or less, that's a good leader that isn't threatened by the people that they lead wants, right? Like they want people that are going to continue to take on more, that are going to have, that they can trust to do so, right? That they have the technical competency, that they have the project management capabilities, their alignment with the values, that they're leading themselves and others well, right? Like the more I see that, the more I'm excited to have those individuals and to help them grow, because again, they're going to do great things. And that's both within our organization and at some point somewhere else. And that's a good thing for the world and for other companies and for our industry and all of these sorts of things. So doing these things is going to help you move in that direction far faster, because that's the thing. The engineer that's doing these things may or may not be making, again, on the surface, they may or may not be doing significantly more than the other, but they're preparing themselves to do so, right? And so by putting themselves in that position and being clear about the things that they're working towards and articulating those well, you're going to put yourself in a better position to move forward in your career faster. So in closing, my goal and my hope is that you all, I saw people that were saying they want to break into software engineering, or they're early in their career and they want to move forward. That is my hope for everyone, right? Like that you are growing, that you're growth oriented, that you want to do these things, and that through your approach and framing, you will continue to grow quickly and effectively in your career. So hopefully there's been some helpful tips. I'm excited to gather in the Q&A and hopefully get some good questions that will expand on this further. And if there was anything that was unclear, happy to articulate or explain those further. So thanks for listening.
Well, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Jeremy. I think that was really insightful talk, and something I love about this talk, and especially this talk being the first one that we do in the summit, is that this is something that applies to everybody. Like no matter what company we're in, or what tech stack that we're looking that we're working into. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insight and experience. Let me put myself in the spotlight. I think I might be not visible right now. Yeah,
I'm gonna stop sharing anyways, because all I have is this Q&A slide.
Yeah. Oh, it's okay. I mean, that's what we're doing, right now.
Well, that's true. It is what we're doing.
Yeah,
It feels more collaborative. If I could see you better. I wish I could see all of the folks that are on the call. I love interacting with people, but
Yeah, it's one of the quirks of Zoom webinar, but it's okay. We all talk in chat. It's quite active. Anyway, so yeah, right now it's the Q&A time. I see that there's some here. Oh, wow, some very, very detailed, insightful questions I already see. So yeah, feel free to keep adding them. We have quite a while to go through them. But let's start with the first one. I have a listener called Emily. She asked, so by frameworks, do you mean job requirements? The skills that are asked in job postings. I think she might be referring to one of the slides you have. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, yeah. So yes, I really mean like a career progression framework, right? And really, those should be aligned with what the job posting is, right? Like, ideally, they're very closely aligned. A lot of times, what you'll find is that like what is in a job posting, as somebody who's making these frequently, you try and balance being overly verbose, right? You don't want to put absolutely everything in there, because it's going to sound like your expectations are completely unrealistic, right? Whereas a career progression framework should probably be a more verbose, because it's going to help you as the person on this team to see more things that you can grow in, right? And similarly, it's not a checkbox. It's not a list of things like, green, okay, promotion, right? There's like hopefully enough breadth in that you are growing. But that's what I'm talking about, is like a career, like more of a career progression framework, or career ladder track for, like, let's say, again, it depends on titling and things like that, but an L1 engineer is like a software engineer or a junior developer, to a software engineer 1 or a software engineer 2, to a senior engineer, to a staff engineer, to a tech lead if they have a tech lead, sometimes also a different role. But to a principal engineer, right? Like this kind of progression framework is what I'm talking about. If that's not clear though, ask another question and I'll try and make it clear.
Yeah, it seems that Emily has responded in the chat since yeah, the answer her questions. But yeah,
Awesome.
so for the questions, please push. I know some people are asking in the chat, but help us by putting in the Q&A because that's easier for us to see in one place. It won't get lost in the chat. All right, so we got another question here. This person says, I've done well with my technical proficiency, but I failed repeatedly when I've been given project management or leadership responsibilities. Is there a way to grow and succeed by focusing on technical proficiency and working with a competent project manager or leader? Wouldn't it be similar to a developer working with a designer, something like that? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm rereading this question once. There's multiple questions here.
Yeah, it's a good context. Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, it's hard to know when you say, I mean, you've said you failed repeatedly in your project management and leadership responsibilities. It's hard to know because I don't know the context there, but I'll try and share some things, right? Like that kind of go back to what I'm talking about here in this whole presentation, which is like, what are the expectations there? I would try and get, like, if it's not clear, talking to, if you don't understand like how you're not operating well there, project management might be a little more like binary, right? Like made an estimate, missed the estimate. Well, there's lots of things that you can read and study on kind of estimation frameworks and things like that. There's a book called Scrumban by VJ Reddy. Scrumban Revolution. Scrumban. I think it's a really good book. It's got a lot of like helpful project management concepts that are applied to agile methodology that could be helpful. But in general, I think there's like, this is where getting insight and working with your manager or with others to go like, okay, can you help me get better at this? Project management estimation is hard. It's not a science. It's like there's, right? It's somewhat science, somewhat art. And it's understanding, in a lot of cases, not overestimating, not underestimating these sorts of things, but working with others there can be really helpful. But I think understanding what are the expectations in project management leaderships? Is it communication? What are the things that I'm not doing well? And how do I kind of get better at this? But absolutely, like I would say, if you can get a mentor. So I'm part of an organization called Plato. It's a mentoring organization where you can chat with me or other engineers or engineering leaders through problems and things like that can help coach and give advice and things like that. If you don't have something internal, that's an external source, but that can be really helpful because it's hard to answer a question like this without really getting into the context, because leadership is nuanced, right? Project management is a discipline. You can learn it. There are things there if it's kind of really, really specific, but leadership is much more situational based and like, how are you presenting a message and things like that. So hopefully that's helpful. But like, I would start at least by clarifying the expectations. And there's definitely like, read up on the subjects if you feel like you need to grow in that specifically. And I would share that, right? Like going back to my framework, hey, we've identified these areas as areas I'm not excelling in. Here's what I'm doing right now. Can you also give me time with this individual or with that person or mentoring or something like that so that I can continue to grow more effectively? Because I'm serious about growing in this area.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing some questions still popping up in the chat, and that's fine. I mean, we can try to do that, but I'm still encouraging you all to put it in the Q&A. You can see like there's a Q&A feature, like a button on the bottom toolbar. That's a Zoom webinar exclusive, so put it there. It'll be easier for us to see. So, anyways, let's keep going. Yeah, this Alex asked a question. There's quite a bit of context, so let me try to read it out. So hello, Jeremy. The framework section really hit home. I was hired on as a software developer for a startup and reported directly to the CEO. However, one of the things that was difficult in my tenure, there was no framework, and with me being the only developer, novice one, I found it very hard to accomplish the amount of workload and always seemed like I was set up for failure in terms of the framework or support in the business. My CEO was not technical to where he could help review my documentation, so it was frustrating working on databases and Java documentation without any feedback slash growth. What would you recommend for someone like myself?
That is a hard situation, and one I've seen before. So first of all, every CEO that I've worked for, CEOs are wired a little bit differently. And I don't mean that in a bad way. They're just like, there's something like that tends to go with that personality trait of people that want to be CEOs. They're driven, they, want to move forward and things like that. And so there's definitely like nuance in working with and building trust with that level and that role. And depending on your level of technical capability, right? Like it's going to be hard. I know this isn't like a great answer, but if it's like if you let's just use a scenario. I don't know if this is the exact scenario, but if you're asked to architect an application and you don't have you like don't have the experience to know how to do that really well, and it's really far out of reach, I think like it's risky, but being clear and honest, if you want to like be honest with you, like, hey, this is this is new for me. I'm doing this and I'm trying to help, trying to understand what things are though. But if you want me to do this, I'm going to need some sort of help. And again, I think that's where getting whether that's additional resources, other people that can help you to design and architect and communicate, whether it's mentorship, those sorts of things, and or like it might be a very difficult role, right? Like if you really want to keep doing it and learn, you're just going to be having some difficulty. You're going to learn, you're going to grow, right? Like that's early on in my career. That's how I learned a lot of things, was just bit off more than I could chew and worked a whole lot of hours and read and, failed a lot and was not making very much money. But, ultimately I learned a ton in a short period of time, but that's hard. It's hard to do, right? And you're also dealing with the people side of it. So, I mean, I think, again, if you're there's like a trust thing, building that trust with the CEO, helping to coach them and understand how to work with them, but then also like understanding like, do I have the capacity to effectively build the thing that I need to build here? And if I'm not, what are my options, right? Like kind of leave. I mean, that's an option. Get additional resources to help you. And again, depending on how honest you can be with that individual, that's sometimes a good solution, right? Like, hey, we need somebody else that can help to design this part. I can do this part. So that may not be the answer you want to hear, but hopefully it's at least some perspective on maybe a ways of approaching this problem.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, this person asked, do you have tips about how to define realistic goals? Yeah, I think, you have anything to add besides what you've shared before?
It's hard to know because what you would think is realistic may not be what I think, and without an example, I can't speak to that. But in general, I would say asking for feedback from others. If you think that there are people within your org that are doing that, right, that are able to set realistic goals that are getting received well, then why don't you talk to them, right? Like, and ask them, like, how are you approaching this? Can you help me? Is there any tips? Like, did this always go this way for you? If not, then how did you change your approach to do so, right? I mean, it's hard because so much of it has to do with trust. So much of setting of like communication of goals, of things like that, has to do with like trust and execution. So it's hard without a specific sort of thing to know how to answer that. But those are some of the things that kind of come to mind.
All right, thank you. Douglas asks, thank you for the talk. You mainly focused on inter-organizational growth. Are there general tips for industry growth? What are other organizations looking for in a potential candidate?
I think it's exactly the same. I don't think there's any difference. If you're, and again, you could even share that if you get the opportunity, like, hey, I don't know if you have a career, if you're, let's say, interviewing with another company, I don't know if you guys have a defined career ladder, but here's how I generally think about this. And here's some of the things a very common question that I ask when I am interviewing people, in case you interview with me, here you go, is talk to me about something that you've learned in the past couple of months and how you've applied that, right? Both technical and non-technical, because I'm looking for growth-oriented individuals, and that's a perfect example for you to go, hey, here's, yeah, I have, here's what I've been working on. Here's kind of a framework that I use mentally to think about this. And again, those things are going to align in general in the industry across companies, because I've worked at many different companies and there's been, a lot of similarities across these things. I mean, specific things that one company might be looking for versus another is going to be kind of out of the scope of this, because it's going to be very dependent. But in general, the things that I shared are going to be, they are industry wide.
Great. Our next one, I think, is basically Luigi with a J at the end. So you mentioned there's some managers that may feel threatened when you take ownership of your growth. How do you deal with that? Do you back down on the activities that are beyond your core role?
I'm sorry. You are right. And I know that's not, again, maybe not what you want to hear, but I'm sorry, and you're right. It is difficult when you have not amazing managers that are threatened by other people's potential. So if you want to stay in that organization, right, I think and that's very personal. There's lots of things around that, but I would try and figure out, and that's why I said, like, early on, identifying where does your manager fit in the context of your organization. Is this manager somebody that will help you to grow and can help you to grow, right? And those are two different things, right? Willingness and capacity. If they can't, is there somebody else that can help you, right? And you have to be very careful there, right? But if you want to stay in that organization and you want to grow there, maybe making relationships with other leaders and managers is one way of going about that. Again, you got to be careful with that, especially with a manager that is already threatened. But if they are threatened, and if they're in a healthy leadership organization, hopefully that's identified through SCEP levels or through other things, and hopefully they either grow or are managed out themselves, right? In which case, you may not have to deal with that too long. If it's not, and there's not a healthy organizational culture, again, there's a question of, do you want to stay there? But if you do, it may be more difficult to grow and it's going to take more time. But that is actually why this framework is so helpful. If you follow this, you're going to grow. Now, you may not grow positionally, because that is in some ways out of your control, right? Like, this is going to help set you up for growth and put you in the best position possible to grow positionally. But the actuality of that is somewhat outside of your control. But you will grow, and then you get to decide, with your newfound skills, confidence, and competency, do I want to continue investing in this place, or do I want to go somewhere else? And again, like, I say this as a leader, and if my people are on this call, I think that they should think the same way, right? Like, if like, hopefully they, you're valued, you have people that are trying to help you to grow, and that you are growing, and that we're aligned, and that you want to continue working here. But when that's not there, then I think you should question those sorts of things. But again, that decision I know is very personal, and there's so many things that go into that that's beyond just like, what do I as this individual want? But those are some things that hopefully can help you in that scenario.
Thank you. Okay, so there are tons of questions right now, actually. Just
maybe,
letting you know,
my mouth did some more.
Yeah. So we might not be, well, I know we won't be able to get through all of them, but we'll try to get to as many as possible before we end here. And I'm sure Jeremy will share some ways that you can follow him later. They can continue growing in this area. Anyways, let's get a couple more. This person asks, thanks, Jeremy, for the wonderful presentation. So what tools and methods that would you recommend for creating, planning, and tracking goals in general? Can you share your own tools and methods for that?
So fortunately, we at Care Message have an application called Lattice. It's a really cool, it's a software application, obviously. that makes this really quite simple. It allows you to set up one-on-ones, also track goals, and easily, kind of pull those things together so you can, it makes it very simple to do so. But if you don't have a tool like that, I mean, I think it's a great tool if you have the, if you can advocate for that. But this can be honestly done in a Google Doc, right? It's going to take a little bit more effort, a little more work, but literally take a Google Doc. This is what I used to do with my direct reports before this. Google Doc with my manager, line with the date, things I want to talk about, and just keep a running document, right? Then when you've got goals, you can, basically pin those at the top or create a table of contents, right? So you know what your goals are, and then you're easily pulling those back in and making reports on those consistently. Tag them for questions ahead of time. It's really helpful. It also tells that if they're going to look at it ahead of time or not, but then share those. Don't just let that be a thing. Make sure you're covering those things in your one-on-one, and kind of bringing those up. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, awesome. Let me just get a couple more. Okay, this is an interesting one. What is the #1 soft skill that I believe all engineers need to grow in their career?
Communication. The hardest problem, that's a very easy one for me. I say this frequently. The most difficult part about building software is communication. Communication between engineers, communication with customers, communication with other departments, right? It is the most difficult part is effective communication. So work on that, understand the nuances of your organization, be willing, especially in a remote environment, to just, cross the digital gap and go into talk to other product managers. I mean, when I'm talking other departments, talk to sales, talk to customer support, build relationships so that you understand the perspectives, so you better understand your customer, your user, and then ultimately, how do you communicate with your team and your manager and things like this. But all of those things are going to help you.
Yeah, somehow I'm actually not surprised by the answer. Kind of just do communication. It's a huge thing.
It's one of those things where people go oh yeah, I know, I got that. But it's still the hardest thing, right? That's the funny thing. It's still the hardest thing, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think this is an interesting question. So this person asks, as a junior developer, currently our company doesn't really have a one-on-one culture. So is there any way I can do to improve?
Oh, you don't have one-on-ones. That's, I'm guessing, what they mean.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm assuming what this person is talking about.
Yeah. So I'm wondering first if you have a manager, but if you do, I would, or someone, I mean, if you have a manager, even if you have a senior engineer, right? Some other engineer, if you're a junior engineer, right? Ask whomever that is, may I schedule just consistent times where we can check in. I want to grow, and I would say pretty like this. I want to grow, and I want to make sure that I'm adding as much, this is the other thing, articulate value for them. I want to add as much value to you and our organization as possible. I want to be making sure that I'm doing the best that I can. In addition, I want to grow. I want to be able to learn. So I'm going to set ourselves time. I promise to make it valuable and not wasteful, right? It's effective. I'm going to make sure that I'm prepared. And if you need anything from me in reciprocation for that, please let me know. But basically push, ask, make the ask, and push. And I think, again, this is the communication thing. Maybe, it's possible they don't value it, but it's also possible it's just oh, that hasn't worked in the past. Could very well be because people didn't utilize that time effectively. And it's hey, we just took that off the calendar because it was a waste of time. I've seen this happen, right? So reintroduce it, but reintroduce it with the right practices in place and things like that. So I think that's a great way. And if really people aren't willing to do that, again, I go back to my past answer of is that a great culture? Is that a place where you're going to grow? So especially as a early in your career, optimize for growth potential and growth trajectory, because the faster you grow, the more you're going to make an impact, the more across your career you're going to earn, all of those sorts of things.
Awesome. I think maybe we have time for one more. Sorry, there's still a lot. I think I'm just going to pick one that I think might be interesting and relatable to a lot of people. So this person asks, I think a big part of growing is identifying your own issues, issues about ourselves. Do you have a framework or process for raising that self-awareness?
That's a really insightful question, and you're right. So I think that this is where a good framework can help, because if you're able to look at that thing in a some we're not about ourselves, right? It's easier to see faults in others than it is in our own selves. And this is where having somebody else that will help you with that, that can peer into that and speak to that, good managers, good leaders, is really going to help you. But nonetheless, having a framework with which you can look and say, how am I doing against these things? And deciding, right? Like being able to hopefully evaluate yourself in a realistic way is going to be helpful. So like if you have something that's external, right, that you can look at and you can evaluate, how am I doing on these things? I know that's kind of, it's very, it's very ambiguous, but that is what I have found. I mean, I'll tell you something that is a barometer, and maybe this is the last thing I'll leave you with. A barometer for my own growth is how am I doing in my mornings, right? There is a certain set of practices that I do: silence, affirmation, visualization, reading, exercising, and journaling. And I know that might have nothing to do with engineering, but those practices, a lot of them I'm reading, I'm learning things, right? I'm reading new things. I'm writing down my goals and the most important things I need to do personally, professionally, those sorts of things. When I don't do those well, I'm not growing super quickly. I'm not growing as effectively as I could be. So knowing those sorts of things, those practices and habits that are going to get you into that kind of growth mode, and honestly, just taking the time to reflect consistently and writing those down is going to allow you to track over time how well you're doing.
Okay, well, thank you so much, all of you, for the questions. We need to wrap up here because of time, and of course, thank you, Jeremy, for answering those questions with such great effort. So if you didn't get to your questions, yeah, you can connect with Jeremy after this. Yeah, so Jeremy, what is the best way for the audience to connect with you after this talk?
Yeah, I have a Twitter account, jeremy.wight. Use that a little bit. Much more active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, there you go, the links.
Yeah, so if you find me on LinkedIn, happy to connect. I love connecting with folks, and I try and share some of these same topics and concepts frequently. And I love connecting with people. And so I wish you all the best in your journey, and I'd love to stay connected. So, connect up with me on LinkedIn.
All right. Yeah, and do you have any final thoughts or encouragement, advice, or whatever that you wanted to share with our audience before we officially end the session?
I'll give one final encouragement to own your growth, regardless of where you're at, regardless of whether you're a good situation or bad situation. Like, find something, work towards it, set expectations, and pursue the growth that you want to see. And I'm telling you, you're going to grow. And if you find yourself in the not perfect situation, then you're going to find the confidence to find a place that's going to value you and help you to grow in those things as well.
Yeah, that's great. All right, thank you so much, Jeremy. So that is the official end of the session. So thank you all so much for joining. Just some bookkeeping details I want to share with you all. A quick reminder: we are having a swag giveaway. It's going on right now during the summit. So don't forget to use the hashtag DGS 2022 in your social post. That's going to increase your chance to win that giveaway. And also, if you'd like to be a speaker of your own event in the future and share experiences with fellow developers, please check out the Codementor Events homepage. All the links are in the chat. Yeah, I think you had to scroll up a little bit now. Yeah, but you can find that in the chat. So the next event is called Our Journey to Accessibility at Adobe Workfront. It's going to be by Tyler Hawkins, and he is a senior software engineer at Adobe. It's going to happen at 10 a.m. Pacific Daytime, as you can see, which is about an hour away. Yeah, yeah, we really hope to see you all there. We're going to open this webinar, keep it open for another 5 minutes with some information showing. But after that, we're going to close for setup until the next event starts. The link is going to be the same. So yeah, please use it to join future sessions. Thank you so much and hope to see you soon.
Thank you all.